I'm David Icke from England. I went through an extraordinary series of what you might call paranormal experiences, not that they were, 20 years ago in 1990 and 89, and basically the veil lifted. And I saw the world in a completely different way. And I started on a journey of research, which has led me over 20 years to a very obvious conclusion that this world is controlled by very, very few people behind the people we think are in power, and they have a very, very malevolent agenda for humanity as a whole, who to them are nothing more than cattle.
It doesn't take many brain cells on active duty to realize that we are at a fork in the road. We can no longer stand there staring at the map thinking, which way do I go? Because we're facing, in the next few years, enormous challenges, which we can cope with and will come through, and this control system's coming down, but it comes down tomorrow.
When I started talking about this information 20 years ago, you could hardly get anyone to look at it. And in terms of public events, I couldn't fill a phone booth. But over the last 20 years, there's been demonstrably, blatantly, obviously, a fantastic awakening, and it's getting faster and faster all the time. I first of all noticed a big change after 9/11. Although the vast majority of people bought the official line, there was something about it that started to get others to think and come off the fence. And when the weapons of mass destruction were not found in Iraq, it was almost like a confirmation. You know, people talk about, well, you must never believe what the government says, you must never believe what the media says, but so many people just go ahead and do that. And the lack of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq were like somebody reminding you, see, look, governments lie. And after 2003 and all that, this awakening, this questioning of the world, this questioning of authority got more and more blatant. And as the police state and the Orwellian state is breaking the surface ever more obviously, it's getting more and more people to see the world in a way that they wouldn't have done before. And it's getting faster and faster, and it's a great time to be doing what we're doing, putting this information out, and it's very, very encouraging. The whole conspiracy is founded on keeping humanity in a very, very low level of perception about self, perception about the world. This is why we have the dumbing down of education. This is why we have the controlled so-called information that comes through the media. The idea is to keep people in ignorance of anything that would be a problem to the control system. So we're kept in ignorance about the nature of reality itself, the nature of life itself, who we are, where we are, what we're doing here. We're kept in ignorance of the true forces that are manipulating behind the people we see in the public arena, like we had 8 years of Bush, who was blatantly just a figurehead signing his name on the legislation, and he's been replaced by Obama, who is another blatant figurehead doing the same, controlled by the same force, ultimately, that controlled Bush. Now, all these connections have to be kept from people so that we behave and perceive the world and everything in the way that suits the control system. So any awakening, any opening of the mind to see things that people didn't see before is a real big problem for the conspiracy, for the manipulators. And what we're seeing now, as more and more people are awakening, is almost a panic-stricken attempt to put the lid on this, to dumb people down. And this is one reason why we're seeing the ever greater drugging of American children, not just American children, but in the wider world too, while we're seeing more and more of these chemical cocktails in food that destabilize the body's chemical balance, and more electromagnetic pollution to destabilize the the body's electromagnetic balance. All of these things fundamentally affect the way people see the world and their ability to think sharply, to think straight, and to see the peripheral vision which you need to see what's actually going on. They want us here. And what an awakening mind does is start to do this. And when you do that, you start to connect dots that you can't actually see here. What we're looking at now is an irresistible force, I would suggest, which is the gathering awakening of humanity coming face to face with what thinks it's the immovable object, the conspiracy, but isn't, as we'll see, although it's going to take some years before that becomes obvious. And so we're at this fork in the road where people have to choose. Are they going to go on being controlled sheep and robots of the control system, or are they going to wake up and take the road to freedom? That's the fork in the road, and that's the choice that people are facing now and will face ever more blatantly in the next few years. When you look at the bloodline families and the control system that they oversee, it seems that they are all-powerful. They control the media ownership level and at key positions within it. They control the corporations, the cartels of oil, of pharmaceuticals, etc. They control the forces of law enforcement and the military, ultimately. But one thing they don't control is the numbers. This is what humanity has. It has vast numbers of people, enormous numbers of people, compared with those at the core of the control system that actually know exactly what they're doing and what the agenda is. They are tiny in number compared with what is now supposed to be 7 billion people on the planet. So one of the agendas to bring this under greater control for them is to massively cull the population. They want to reduce the numbers. Now, if you want to remove lots of people, you can do it by injecting stuff into people's arms and they just keel over dead. But if you do that, and of course there is some of that goes on, but if you do that, are the other people lined up are going to say, excuse me, I ain't having whatever they've had. So you do it in a more subtle way, and you target the defense mechanism that everyone has called the immune system. For instance, people don't die of AIDS. They die of AIDS-related disease, which are diseases that the immune system, before it becomes shot, would have defended the body from. So all the time now we're having the immune system targeted, not least among children and young people, by vaccinations, by food additives and drink additives, etc. And if we just think about this, I mean, it's so blatant. If people just take a deep breath and take a step back and look at it with a bit of peripheral vision, we have a situation now, not just in America, but in Britain and the wider world, where between birth and about 2 years of age, we're having children be given 25 and rising different vaccinations and combinations of them, poured in all this, these chemical cocktails that destabilize the body, but more important than that, they have to be dealt with by a still developing immune system. So the immune system's still developing, it's still coming up to optimum efficiency, and suddenly this tidal wave of chemical concoctions is thrown at it and has to deal with it. As it's dealing with one, suddenly another one comes. 25 vaccinations over the first 2 years of life. It is, by any level of common sense, it's ludicrous, and it's meant to be ludicrous because it's targeting the immune systems of young children, which, because it's done at a developing time in the immune system, rewires it, destabilizes it, imbalances it for the rest of their lives. Those kids' immune system will never be as efficient as it would have been otherwise. My son, he's now 16, he's never had a vaccination. He's 6'5", incredibly healthy, never had a childhood disease. And his mates at school had childhood diseases. They had the whole blooming lot. And it has been planned for a very, very long time. You can pick up the confirmation of this in different points through history. To have a situation where you manipulate a mass global vaccination program to target the population at one time. We're seeing this now with the swine flu. I was told in 1997 by a CIA scientist who asked to meet me to get lots of information out that he couldn't, that in 1997 in the secret projects and the underground bases, they had microchips that were so small they could be inserted into people through a hypodermic needle in vaccination programs, and that was the plan. All these years later, of course, we now have a name for this technology. We call it nanotechnology. And he was saying that the plan was to use vaccination programs to insert these microchips. Then you look at other examples of this. For instance, in 1969, there was a doctor called Dr. Richard Day, who was head at the time of Planned Parenthood, which of course is a eugenics organization, which used to have eugenics in its name. And he told doctors in Philadelphia, or Pittsburgh, I think, Pittsburgh, in 1969, a series of things that he said were going to happen in the years to come to transform society and bring in this control system. And when you look at what he said, compared with what's happening now, it's extraordinarily accurate. And some of the areas he covered were that they were going to create new viruses in laboratories that were resistant to drugs, that they were going to use that to cull the population, that they were going to use vaccinations to cull the population, and also that they were going to change the way that healthcare treated old people so that more and more old people died and didn't go long into life, because from their extraordinarily sick perspective, old people are useless to them. And what we're looking at now very clearly is this attempt to play that card of mass global immunization with a excuse of this manufactured virus to get access to the bodies, the body computer systems, as I would say, of almost everyone on the planet. And they're not doing that because they want to protect people from anything. Crikey, the force that's saying be vaccinated is the force that created the virus which they're saying be vaccinated against. They're doing this to get access to the global population for very, very malevolent reasons. And what people need to realize is that these families do not come from the same perspective of life and respect that we do. They see humans like cattle, nothing more than cattle, and most humans see cattle. They therefore have no empathy with the consequences for the human population of their actions. So if people say, they'd never do that, mate, no, no, you'd never do that. They do it all the time. There are two classic techniques of mass mind manipulation and emotional manipulation. One of them I call problem reaction solution, the other one I call the totalitarian tiptoe. Problem reaction solution is devastating. It's been used for as long as you can chart back human history. And it goes like this. You want to change society or get people to accept something that in the normal course of events they wouldn't accept. So you don't say openly, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. You play this technique, PRS, problem reaction solution. Stage one, you create a problem. It could be a manufactured virus in a laboratory. It could be an economic collapse. It could be a war. It could be a terrorist attack like 9/11. You then, through a pathetic, unquestioning media, which at ownership level and lower levels too you control, you get through the media, you tell the people the version of that problem that you want them to believe, i.e. swine flu broke out on a pig farm in Mexico. Yeah, flying pig farm. Thank you very much. That 9/11 was orchestrated by a guy with a beard in a a cave in Afghanistan and all that stuff. You want a reaction at stage 2 from the public of outrage, of classically fear, and you want them to either say to the authorities, do something, or you want them to accept what the authorities suggest must be done. So you can go to stage 3, which is to offer the solutions to the problems you have covertly created. And with the swine flu, and whenever I say swine flu, I mean swine flu in quote marks, because it's not swine flu, it's a combination of flus created in a laboratory. The swine flu scam is classic problem reaction solution. You create the virus, you put it out there, you say, oh, there's a problem, we must have a solution, which is the vaccine. And of course, you then find that the patents for the vaccine were applied for before the virus was put out, and people started to get the consequences of it. It's quite obviously a blatant scam, and through the mainstream media that doesn't connect these dots, which are there to be connected to anyone with a brain cell on active duty, the vast majority of the public go along with it. But what's really encouraging at this point where I speak is the number of people who are saying no to this, and their backbones need to stay stiff when the pressure comes on more and more to accept it, to say no and keep saying no, because this vaccination program is a key fundamental brick, plank, whatever you want to call it, within this whole agenda. And if we can throw a spanner in the works of this and have vast numbers of people refuse the vaccine, it actually throws a spanner in the works of so much more that is due to come along afterwards. People have asked me over the years, you know, what's planned? And I've said, read 2 books, George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. The latter was published in 1932. Orwell's book was in 1948. Because these two had access to the agenda through something called the Fabian Society, they weren't writing from imagination. They had an understanding of where this was supposed to go. And in Brave New World, you have Aldous Huxley describing a society in which children are disconnected from their parents, where they're bred in laboratories, and where drugs are used to get the children to, and as they become adults, the whole population, to love their servitude and not rebel against it. And we are now seeing quite blatantly the movement to remove children from their parents. It's been done through what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, step by step by step by step, where more and more parental rights are taken by the state, more and more and more, and where the school becomes ever more powerful in the control it has over the children. And now we're moving into areas that we have, staggeringly extreme as they may seem, they're no longer rare. This is commonplace, where in Britain, and I know from the research I've done for the book I'm writing at the moment, it's happening in America and elsewhere, where the authorities are taking children away from their families for the most extraordinary reasons. I'll give you an example, and like I say, this is not rare. We had a case in Britain recently where these parents spent £38,000 on fertility treatment to have a child. When the child was born, soon after the child came home from the hospital, a social worker came round, and the mother just joked that giving birth had ruined her figure. On the basis of that, the child was taken away. And we're seeing extraordinary examples of the so-called justification for taking children and the state taking control of them. And what then happens, and happens in this case, is the social services say to them, okay, we're taking your child away, we're going to give it to foster parents of our choice. Now, you have a choice. You can either accept this, in which case you might see your children on, access time here and there, or you can challenge this decision, in which case you'll never see your children again. And the decisions are then made in secret family courts, which are not allowed to be reported by the media, where a single judge is making the decisions. And, you know, if you describe this society to people a few years ago, you'd say, you've got to be talking about China, mate, ain't you? No, this is America, this is Britain, this is Europe, this is the so-called civilized world that it's happening in. And it's not the end of it, it's just the latest step in the tiptoe towards total state control of children. And that's what they want. And we either put a line in the sand now or regret it not too far in the future. What's being targeted is anything that holds people together. So the family unit is something that keeps people together. I'm not religious. I'm not into religion at all. But also religious structures are being targeted because they hold people together. What they want to do is break down all units that are in any way keeping people in some kind of organization, in some kind of mutual support system, because they want the state to be the total arbiter and dictator of human life, and therefore any structure that is a problem to that, they want to bring down. You see, if you have a family unit, then within that unit there can be diversity of the way children and the family see the world. This family unit, if they're together, there can be diversity in the way they see the world. And all these different diverse units of family create exactly that, diversity. What any dictatorship wants, no matter what it is uniformity. It doesn't want diversity of view, diversity of the way people see the world and see each other and all the rest of it. They want uniformity. You look at the Soviet Union. What was it? It was a centralized dictatorship that took away all diversity. You look at any fascist dictatorship, centralized control, take away diversity. So any unit of mutual support, or whatever you want to call it, that offers the opportunity for diversity of debate, diversity of view, they want rid of, because they want the central point in the tyranny to dictate the version of life and self that everybody has. You know, it's always the case that tyrannies want uniformity. Look around the world. All diversity is being removed. And even the built environment, you go around the world now, you will go into these cities in previously diverse cultures, and if you didn't know, you could look out the hotel window and you wouldn't be able to tell where you are. This is the reason. Tyrannies want uniformity, and diversity, therefore, is under target and being targeted wherever you look. Eugenics has been with us for a very, very long time. At first, it was open. Of course, you had eugenics courts in America, etc., that were dictating that certain children or families, certain, according to the authorities, IQs, etc., disablement, they were to be stopped from having children. And then, of course, Britain, as usual, was massively involved in this. And the Rockefeller families, the Harrimans, the Rothschilds, all these people were involved in this. And then along came Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, which gave a very bad name to the term eugenics. So what did they do after that? They just changed the names from eugenics and hid behind front names like Planned Parenthood, etc. And they've gone on running this eugenics program ever since. And, you know, some very, very famous people through the years, including people involved in the Fabian Society, including Julian Huxley, who was the head of the British Eugenics Society. He was the brother of Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, very accurate book because he knew what the agenda was. And behind the facade of these families and these front men, they want to cull the population. Not only that, they want to manipulate the breeding of the population to remove what they perceive as the lower stock. And they did it before openly, tried to, and now they're doing it covertly. And their big kind of final card, if you like, is for a massive cull of the population, which will remove vast numbers of people on this planet. And that's where they're leading. And you know, through their access to mass vaccination programs, they're hoping to bring that about.
I've not come over to tell people what to believe. This world is drowning in people telling others what they should think, what they should believe, what they should and shouldn't do. What I'm presenting today is information.
I realized a long time ago that this family bloodline interbreeding control system of these elite families was not just a human thing. It went beyond that into entities that are anything but human. And it was only with the passage of the years and more research when I started to realize the nature of this reality that we're experiencing that made sense in how this structure is playing out. What the system has done is to keep from us the nature of the reality we're experiencing and the nature of who we are in life itself. And in doing so, it has kept us completely in the dark about what's actually happening around us. The knowledge that's passed across the top levels of the secret society network through these bloodline families, the most important part of that knowledge is the knowledge of reality itself. For instance, we think as we look around here that we're seeing everything that exists within this room. But in fact, we're only seeing a frequency range, a very tiny one, called visible light. Anything outside of that, we can't decode, therefore we can't see. But just like radio stations share the same space without interfering with each other, so other worlds, other dimensions, other realms of reality, if you like, share the same space without interfering with each other. However, just as with radio, if you've got two stations that are very close on the dial, then one will be the dominant one, but another one, you'll get what we call interference from it. It's the same with these various realities that share the same space. It's what mainstream science calls parallel universes. Just outside of the frequency range of visible light, there are entities that are anything but human who have been manipulating this reality, this world, for eons. And because they are working on, operating on a frequency that's different to ours, they have to manipulate our world through conduits. I mean, interfaces. For instance, when you see scientists in a laboratory, they want to work with material that's very dangerous. So the material will be in a big glass tank, and they will be outside the tank, and they'll put on those gloves, and they can work from outside the tank into the tank and do what they have to do. It's very, very similar in theme to what these Illuminati bloodlines have been bred for. They are bred to be the vehicles within visible light, this world that we experience, of these entities. And if you go back and you look at religious beliefs, etc., of the ancients and the accounts of the ancients, these entities, which go under different names, some people call them the serpent race, some people call them demonic. In the Islamic culture, they call them jinns, all different names, but the same entities. The bloodlines are interbreeding incessantly and have been right back to ancient Babylon and Sumer and Egypt, etc., and beyond, because they are holding a certain genetic code which allows the possession, another ancient common theme from as far back as you can track right to today, a genetic code which allows these entities to possess these particular bloodline families within the reality that we experience, and these families are therefore simply vehicles of these demonic entities. You research any of these families, be it the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Greenspan, Alan Greenspan, any of these people, you will go eventually into black magic, blood-drinking human sacrifice rituals where they make sacrifices to the gods. And these gods are these entities which feed off human energy and feed off human blood too. So people accept, yes, long ago people used to use human sacrifice to the gods, yes, and all the rest of it. And they think, oh no, we're kind of civilized now. Well, some of us are, but these bloodlines are not, and they're just continuing to do today covertly what they were openly doing in the past. And they are interacting with these entities all the time in their rituals. That's why they do all these rituals. That's why they drink the blood. And ultimately, they are possessed by these entities. And this brings about a simple situation. You've got the entities, let's call them demonic entities for want of a word. They're operating just outside of this visible light reality that we experience. They use the bloodline families as their vehicle to manipulate this reality. They take over their mental, what passes for their emotional processes, their physical processes. And what that means is, when these bloodline families go into positions of power, what we're actually doing is seeing these entities go into those positions of power. And so the secret society network is there to manipulate these bloodline families and their agents into the positions that dictate society and the direction it goes and all the rest of it. And because we can only decode their visible light level, we see the human level. We see people under different names called Rockefeller and Rothschild and Bush and Obama and all the rest of it. But if we could see beyond visible light just a little bit, and some people can, you would see overshadowing these people anything but a human entity. And it's these entities that have passed through what we call history, and they have been the cement, the guiding force that has brought this conspiracy through to the present day. Because people have asked me in the past, quite rightly, I understand it, why would someone give their life to this conspiracy, this global takeover, in 1500 or 1650 or 1820, when they knew they were never going to be around to actually see it happen, which is what they're trying to do now, playing the cards they're playing now? The answer to that is they were just vehicles. These entities are the common force passing through history, which has led this conspiracy to where it is today.
And the idea is to so tie up the world that they make everywhere in the world dependent on everywhere else in the world, which means that no one has control over their own destiny. It's all in the hands of other people and situations that they have no control over. That's the idea. People talk about the prison planet. The prison planet is the human mind in prison. That's what it is. But if you keep going, because you want to know the origin of this, then you go out of this reality called visible light. You go out of this into other levels of reality.
If you go to a stage hypnotist show, what do you see? You see stooges on the stage, and then you see the hypnotist, and he goes along and he uses his techniques to implant a belief in reality into the stooges. He might tell them there's an elephant in the audience. He might tell them that the woman next to the person is naked. And when you start to understand how we create reality and decode reality, you can see how simple this is. The brain is decoding reality like a computer decodes information and puts it on the screen. However, if you program the computer to read the information in a certain way, then it will. And in the same way, if you can program the human brain to read information in a certain way, then it will. Example, in a hypnotist stage show, I've seen people being given a potato and being implanted with the belief that's an apple. Now, when they eat that, normally they would reel back a raw potato, but they don't, because the electrical signals carrying the taste of that potato go to the brain and normally would be decoded as a potato. Because of the implanted belief it's an apple, it decodes that as an apple, and they actually taste an apple. I've seen people in a hypnotist stage show being told that when a certain code is given, they're going to smell something horrible. And he gives the code, and the line of them go, "Oh my God!" This is how it's possible. Now you take that onto the collective level, and you think that when we're watching television, our brain waves go into the same brainwave state as they do in a hypnotic trance. And what that does is open the mind, open the psyche to programming from, and what do we call those things between the adverts? What do they call them? Programs, television programs. It's television programming. So we think of a hypnotist programming people in a stage show, but the media, not least through television, is constantly programming the human psyche with a sense of itself, a sense of the world, a sense of what's happening in the world, a sense of what to think about people like politicians and Obama, what to think about the way the system works. If we succumb to that program, and vast numbers of programming, and vast numbers of people do, then we're simply going to go through robotically, just like the stooges on a stage hypnotist show, and we're going to react to the world, and we're going to behave in a way that we've been programmed to behave in. And this programming is 24/7. And another aspect of this program we laughingly call education. If you were sitting around a table, I don't know, a century or so ago, and you said, right, okay, we want to turn out children as the adults we want them to be, so they're easily controllable, they're easily manipulatable, and they'll see the world and themselves the way we want them to see it. Now, any ideas around the table how we could do this? Someone might say, well, I'm not sure they'll have this, but I'll tell you what would be perfect. We take the children from their parents at a very, very early age, and throughout their formative years, up through school and college and university, we have control of what goes into their heads, to their minds, like at least 5 days a week, most days of the year. That would be perfect, because we turn out almost everyone to see the world the way we want them to see it. Well, that's exactly what they've done. And now we're having Obama talking about having American children at school for longer and all the rest of it. And it's all part of the process of, A, giving the children more time under the state's control and influence than the parents, and also having more time to program the young people to see the world and become the adults that they want them to be. There's one area that's very important to understand in how people apparently come out of nowhere to positions of power and influence, like they say, or lots of people believe that Obama came out of nowhere. He was prepared for a very long time to do what he's doing now. These people do not do ad lib. They don't do make it up as you go along. It's all projected a long way forward. And it's also extraordinary the number of people, even in the apparently lower positions of power and influence within the church, within entertainment, etc., who turn up as expressions of this bloodline elite. And I've understood this over the years, having met people who've been on the inside. I'll give you one example. I communicated with a guy who lives in America now, living under another name, but he was an unofficial Rothschild. His father was the guy who started the Rothschild wine estates in France. And he told me how the Rothschilds and these bloodline families not only interbreed with many different women to produce the bloodline, but they actually have sperm banks, because the sperm bank holds the genetic code that they operate on. And part of that genetic code is it's had deleted from it any feeling of empathy. Very, very important point. These people do not have the ability to empathize with the consequences for others of their actions. So 3,000 dead on 9/11, well, there's no emotional consequence at all, because that ability to empathize, which is a fail-safe mechanism of human behavior, has been deleted from the genetic structure, purposely. But this man, who was an unofficial Rothschild, one of thousands and thousands, this guy was telling me, who were produced by the breeding programs and the artificial breeding programs, was designated a specific role, and that was to have a position within the Christian church, even though they were all practicing Satanists, and undermine it and dictate its direction from within. Because they produce these children, and they bring them up under different names, you will not have a situation where every president's a Rockefeller, where every prime minister is a Rothschild. You get the picture. Because they come through different names. They're called Clinton, they're called Bush, they're called Obama, etc. But forget the name, the genetic structure, the bloodline is the same. And this bloodline filters down, not just at the from the high positions, but right out into mainstream society. Why do some artists who have a certain amount of talent, some not very much, why do they get picked up by the corporations to become these big influencers of young people and other people through the entertainment and the music industry, and others with incredible talent never get off the ground? It's because they are chosen. The scale and fine detail in which these opinion formers right across society, from entertainment, media, through to politics, etc., are actually brought through from childhood to do those things is absolutely incredible. And when the lid really comes off this, and it will, it's coming off, then people are going to look at the world they've been living in and see just... Even if people now think, yes, it's a controlled world, whoa, wait till you see the level of control. And they have their people all over the place in all these different institutions, religions, etc., to push society in the desired direction.
When he left the body, everything from the beginning, my birth, my ancestors, my children, my wife, everything comes together simultaneously. I saw everything about me and about everyone who was around me. I saw everything they were thinking now, what they thought then, what was happening before, what was happening now. There is no time, there is no sequence of events, no such thing as limitation of distance, of period, of time, of place. I could be anywhere I wanted to be simultaneously. That is who we are. And that is what they want to keep from us, so that we will serve the control system, because they got no chance when we realize that's who we are.
You know, people talk about the human mind as if it's like the arbiter of human awareness and perception. It isn't. This is why it's so important to get across, and for people to realize what the nature of this reality is that we're experiencing. This is quite provably, when you look at the science, it's obvious. We live in a virtual reality universe. It's like a three-dimensional holographic version of the internet. If you go on the internet in Australia or South Africa or South America or Los Angeles, you're all accessing the same collective reality through the computer. Well, we, in our prime state, are consciousness, not form, but awareness. And this awareness experiences this tiny frequency range we call this world, just a tiny frequency range called visible light, through a interface called body-mind. If I want to go on the internet, I can't just go on the internet. I have to have a conduit to go on the internet, a computer. And even then, I don't go on the internet. The computer does. I observe the internet through the computer. This is what consciousness, awareness, the real eternal self that these religious teachings talk about, etc., and non-religious teachings too, talk about. This eternal self. Some people call it soul, whatever you want to call it. And if you hold that awareness to that higher level of self, you're in this world, if you like, physically and experiencing it, but your point of observation is outside of this manipulated reality. And through the lens of body-mind, you can see things that the body-mind in this world and of it cannot see. And the more the system, when you study it, from cradle to grave, be it education, media, all these things, they're all, even religion to a large extent, is designed to pull our focus of attention into body-mind. It's the same. A very good analogy is you're on the internet, and suddenly the computer takes control of what you think of the internet, where you go on the internet, and the decisions you make. And the more entrapped you are in mind-body perception, i.e. the five senses, and look at society, it's all about pulling us into the five senses. Look at this, listen to this, taste this, feel this, all trying to hold us in the five senses. The more entrapped you are, the longer it takes, the more powerful the transformation has to be for you to wake up, open your mind, and go to higher levels of your awareness. What has been happening, I've seen this all over the world, I've been to 50 countries, it's happening everywhere over the last 20 years, is more and more people are going through this process, they call it transformation, whatever, where they open their mind and they let their true self consciousness in. Now consciousness is looking from this perspective, mind's looking from here, and that's why they want to keep us entrapped in mind-body perception, because we're looking here, we can see one dot, maybe two dots at a time. We can't connect the dots and see what's going on. Once you become conscious beyond body-mind, suddenly, oh, I can see how it fits together now. I've come across people only recently who've gone from this to this in literally weeks. Why couldn't I see it before? They say it's so obvious, because you were there before and now you're there. That's why it's obvious. And so this fork in the road, where people are deciding, are they going to keep on the way we're going and end up in this fascist control system, or are they going to go this way and break out into true freedom? In many ways, fundamentally, not in many ways, this fork on the road, in the road is, are you going to stay in mind and think you are Fred Jones, born in Pittsburgh in 1942, that's who you are? Or are you going to open your mind to who you really are, which is consciousness, infinite, eternal consciousness, having an experience as that man, born in 1942, whatever I said. And that's the difference. Once you realize that our name, our job, our experience is just that, an experience, and we are consciousness, that change of point of perception, point of observation of this world transforms everything. You go from this to this, and you can see what the control system doesn't want us to see, and that's why the control system is absolutely structured to hold us in that state. The power of human consciousness is demonstrable by the fact that despite all the things that are thrown at us, the cradle-to-grave programming, vast numbers and an exponential curve of numbers are now waking up from it. And it's this awakening that is going to bring this control system down. Not tomorrow, not next year, not the year after, not in 2012 like so many people kind of talk about, but I reckon about 2016, this awakening will have reached the point where the tipping point comes and this control system comes down, because the control system is absolutely founded completely in terms of its existence on humanity being there and not there. And so they may seem confident and arrogant, and it may seem like that, and it will seem that for a few years, but it's coming down, and it's coming down because humans are waking up.
And this appears to be what's going on in the world, but actually it's just a stage show that manipulates human perception so that we accept things happening which increase all the time the control of this system over the mass of humanity.